Okay, welcome back to the second semester here. What we're going to do now is practice a little bit on verbal morphology. If you haven't figured this out already, it's probably soon you did figure good that you figure out soon that really handling verbs is probably 70 to 80% of being able to read Greek. Okay, you look at a noun, for instance, like logos. You've got the singular and plural. You've got the four different possible cases, and five if you throw in the vocative. So there's really maybe 8 or 9 forms, which are not all that difficult to tell the difference between each other. You got 8 or 9 possible forms that you could see there. However, with a verb like luo, there's lots of different ones you could see. I mean, you get 6 in the present active alone, but then that doesn't count the middle or passive ending. That doesn't count the other tenses like the future tense, the aorist tense, the perfect tense, and all of those tenses, as well as the middle or passive forms. And in some cases, for aorist and for future, the middle and passive are even distinct from one another. So you have all those forms, and that's just the indicative. Soon we will see the subjunctive, and we'll see present subjunctives. We'll see aorist subjunctives, and we'll see those in middle and passive voice as well. We'll see imperatives that can be in the middle or passive voice, and second and even third person imperatives as well. There are not too many of them in biblical Greek, but there are in classical Greek optatives, which occur in all 3 different forms. But you do see them in Greek, and so you can't freak out when you see those. Those are possible ones as well. And that doesn't count participles. Participles will show up in present tense, aorist tense, and perfect tense. There are even future participles, although there are very few of them in the New Testament. And those are also in active and middle and passive forms as well. And then within those, since they're verbal nouns, you have all the various conjugation, declension endings within those for the different cases, and whether they're singular or plural. So again, you look at a verb like luo, and there's well over 100 forms that you could possibly see. Okay, and I liken the study of Greek to almost like Hercules fighting the Hydra. Okay, whenever you slice off one head, this new head pops out, and it's a lot like trying to sort of tame the verbal system in Greek. And unfortunately, it's going to get a little worse before it gets better. But that's one of the reasons I'm going to go through this and help you to practice this. It's very important that you can do this well. Okay, your ability to read biblical text is largely a function of whether you can do this well. Okay, and this is not a skill we're doing now. We're going to actually be forming these as one that's actually directly relevant to being able to read text. But it's very good practice to get a handle on how the verbal system really works. Okay, so what I want you to do when you see me do this is to follow along, and perhaps afterwards, maybe write the answers on the side, and afterwards you can go over this on your own. Or alternatively, you can go ahead and try, if you feel pretty good about it, to take a crack at forming these and then compare what you do to what I do. Okay, and that might be a way of practicing. But I intend for you to practice this, not simply sit back and watch me do it. Okay, that's going to be a very limited value. But again, I hope that this will be helpful to you. All right, with that, let's go ahead and begin to work through these various forms here that I've asked for. These are all going to be of our paradigm verb luo. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with that. So the first person present active indicative of luo is going to be what? Well, remember, the first person, the present tense is always built on what? It is always built on the first principal part, which is this one, luo, luo. Okay, and so we go ahead and start with that form there. So we have luo, and then all we need to do then is to slap the appropriate first person plural ending on it. Okay, luomen, luomen. All right. Okay, let's take a look at the second one. That was easy enough, hopefully. The second one, we went the third person plural imperfect active indicative of luo. Well, the imperfect is again going to be built on the first principal part, which hopefully we don't need to look that up again. But if we did, it would be this one, luo. luo, like that. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with that. Now the imperfect will have two features to it. One, it will be augmented. The second one will be, it will have a secondary active ending. What's the secondary active endings? Well, the secondary active endings are what? Are on, sn, omen, eta, on. Okay, and so the third plural is going to be on. This is simply something you have to remember. All right. Now the only issue here is the accent. The accent should be back the full distance that it can go, up to 3 syllables. The only thing that would stop it is, of course, if there's a long vowel in the third syllable, which there isn't. So let's go ahead and shift the accent back to the antepenult there accordingly. And there you have it, eluon. Okay, the second person plural aorist active indicative. The second person plural aorist active indicative is going to be built on your third principal part, which is here. Luo, luso, elusa. Elusa. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with that form there. And then to make it plural, second person plural, all we need to do is add the second person plural ending, which is te, ate. Okay, and then the accent will go back 3 syllables, namely to here. Da-da. All right, very good. Number 4. The first singular future active indicative of luo. The first singular future active indicative. Well, the future is going to be built in the second principal part, namely luso. Luo, luso. So we type in here luso, and that's actually the principal part form is the one we wanted because we asked for the first singular. So we're done. The third singular perfect active indicative of luo. The third singular perfect active indicative of luo. Well, the perfect, you hopefully recall, will be formed from your fourth principal part. Okay, luo, luso, elusa, leluka. Leluka. So we'll start ourselves with that one. And all we need to do for this one is to attach the appropriate third person singular ending. Leluka, lelukas, leluken. Okay, and that's it. The second singular present middle indicative, present middle indicative. Okay, this is the first non-active form we've been asked for. Okay, well again, doesn't matter though because we still have to start with the first principal part, which will be luo. That's the basis of all present forms and imperfect forms, as it turns out. Okay, so the second singular present middle indicative. Well, middle we need to do what? We need to switch to our middle passive endings, okay, for primary tense, and we should remember that those are what? My, sai, tai, meta, sa, antai. Okay, my, sai, tai, meta, sa, antai. Okay, so we would have luisai, but that's not actually the form we get, okay, because what happens? Well, the sigma, for reasons I don't fully understand myself, not being an expert in Greek phonology, the sigma tends to fall out, okay? So you get luai, which is kind of an awkward cluster of vowels there, and pretty much they all smash together in a train wreck, crassus, which produces simply eta with an iota subscript. So you get lue, lue, okay? And that's why you get that form there. But it's helpful if you remember the psi was there originally because that psi actually does come up in other forms, like the perfect, for instance. Okay? All right, moving on. The third singular present passive indicative. Third singular present passive. Well, again, no big deal there. Let's start out with luo, which is our first foundational form. Okay, so the present passive indicative, and by the way, these also could be middle. Okay, the present, the lue here could have been passive as well. Okay, and this as well could be middle. The middle or passive and the present are the same form. Okay, that's not true, however, of the future or the aorist. Okay, so remember that fact. Okay, so the third singular present passive indicative will again my, sai, tai, meta, sa, antai. Okay, so tai is what we want here. So lu et tai. And there we are. Okay, the accent goes back to the antepenult. All right, very good. The third singular aorist middle indicative. Third singular aorist middle. Well, hopefully you remember what the principal part is that that's based on. It's the third one. Okay, which is luo, luso, elusa, elusa. So, elusa. Now, the only issue here is we've got to do what? We've got to switch to middle passive forms, but except we don't use my side tie, method saw on tie because this is a secondary tense. Okay, we use secondary middle passive tense endings, which are men, so, to, method saw on to. Okay, so to would be the one we want here. Elusata. Elusata. And our accent goes here. Okay? Great. All right, hopefully this is fairly familiar to you. We've had all these before. Okay, the first singular future middle. The first singular future middle. Well, again, cheat sheet here if you need to. Hopefully you don't need to, but luo, luso is going to be your luso is going to be the foundational term for any future active or middle form. Okay, so you have luso, except we want what? We wanted the first singular future middle. That's the first singular future active. Okay, well, future is a primary tense, so we want my side tie ending. So luso my, like that. Okay, great. Now, hopefully those are pretty straightforward to you. All right, and they are going to get a little bit more difficult in the next section here. Let's just take a look at those. Okay, now jumping up to the top here, the aorist active infinitive. The aorist active infinitive. Okay, well, again, I keep referring to the cheat sheet here, but guys, hopefully you know these well enough that you do not have to keep doing that. Okay, you've got to know your principal parts. The principal parts are really the foundation for the whole verbal system. Okay, if you've got a firm foundation, you can build a skyscraper as high as you want, but if there's no foundation, you're going to be, you know, reinventing the wheel every single time you see a new form. Okay, so again, I cannot stress enough the importance of knowing these principal parts. Okay, not necessarily memorizing them, okay, but more or less just kind of figuring out what they would be is as important as memorizing them. Now, at the very beginning when you're first starting, you kind of do have to memorize them, you know, until you really get a feel for how verbs change, how different kinds of verbs change. Okay, but again, third principal part, elusa. Okay, that's anything dealing with aorist active or middle. Okay, so that's going to be our form here. Let's do it. Elusa. Okay, so the aorist active infinitive. From that, what do we have to do? First thing we've got to do is to remove the augment. The augment only goes on what forms of the aorist? Only on indicative forms. Okay? Anytime you have a participle, anytime you have a subjunctive, as we'll see, anytime you have an imperative, anytime you have an optative, the augment goes away, and the infinitive is no different. Okay? So that's a very, very important fact to remember about how the aorist behaves. That the augment is a temporal augment. Okay, temporal means time. It only goes with the time tense, which is the indicative, which is tenses found in the indicative mood. Okay, so there you go. So aorist active infinitive. Well, again, you have to just add the infinitival ending. There's two possibilities. Okay, ein, which is the infinitive associated with the present tense, and as well as the perfect tense. The other one is I, which you see too sometimes. Okay. So this is going to be the form here. Now, the accent will go on the penult, as it must. Okay. Now, the only thing that's a little unusual about this is that the psi for cases of accentuation is treated as a short vowel. Okay, a short vowel rather than a long one. The fact that we're accenting the penult and there's a short vowel following means we do what? We've got to add a circumflex here. Okay, don't worry so much if you don't remember to do that. I wouldn't care so much if you put a acute accent over the upsilon there. It's not that big a deal. But just so you know, whenever you have a short vowel ending and the accent on the antepenult, you always use a circumflex. Okay. Alrighty. The third plural, aorist passive indicative. Okay, the aorist passive is a form we have not yet seen, at least in our little review session here. That's built on the sixth principal part here. So luo, luso, elusa, leluca, lelumai, eluthane, eluthane. Okay, that's what we have, and so therefore we will start with that form. eluthane. Okay, so the third plural aorist passive indicative, well, that's the first singular. So eluthane, eluthase, eluthe, eluthamen, eluthite, eluthason. Okay, so thason will be our ending, and that you just have to know. Okay, there you go. Moving on. Third singular future passive indicative. Third singular future passive. Well, again, the future passive is formed on the same stem that the aorist passive is. Okay, except for what? The future passive always removes the temporal augment. Okay, that's a little hard to remember at first, but you just have to remember that. Okay, that the future passive never features a temporal augment. Okay, that temporal augment only goes with the aorist passive. Okay, even though the future passive is an indicative form. Okay, these are those little quirks that you have to remember, at least to be able to sight recognize. Okay, so how does the future passive indicative conjugation work? Okay, remember it's luthesami, luthese, luthesatai, luthesamatha, luthesase, luthesontai. Okay, so you got the thesami, okay, for your first singular, luthese for your second singular, and luthesatai for your third singular. Okay, so luthesatai, and your accent will belong here. All right. Okay, the third plural perfect active indicative. Third plural perfect active indicative. Well, the perfect, again, was formed on the fourth principal part for the active. Okay, so you have what? You've got luo, luso, elusa, leluka, leluka. Okay, and so there we go. Leluka. Third plural perfect active indicative. Now all we need to do is give it the third plural ending, and so we only need to add a new here. But, however, there is another form we could have here, and that would be this one. Oops. Leleucocene. Leleucocene. And why did I put a lambda there? It should be a kappa. Leleucocene. Okay, that's the form we actually do see in John's Gospel, which we'll be reading later. Okay, it's not that verb though, but we do see that third plural perfect ending, so be on the lookout for it. Okay, I think the leleucano is a little more common. Okay, moving on along here, the third plural imperfect passive indicative. Third plural imperfect passive indicative. Well, what form was the imperfect built on? The first. Okay. What happens with the imperfect? Okay, augment, secondary ending. In this case, we went secondary middle passive ending. So what are those? Men, so, to, metha, sa, onto, onto. Okay, so there we go. Onto, eluanta. All right. Next, number 15, the third plural aorist active indicative. The third plural aorist active indicative. Well, again, the aorist is by far the most common tense, and as you begin to read more and more exercises, you'll see more aorists by default than anything else, just because that's the most common one. If I ever ask you a parsing on an exam, know that if you're not sure about it, guess aorist. Statistically, you're 70%. You've got a 70% shot at getting it right. Okay, so again, so we start with the third principal part here. So the third plural aorist active indicative, well, elusa, elusasa, elusen, elusamen, elusate, elusan. Okay, elusan. So, and we'll accentuate that as so. Okay? Very good. All right, the aorist passive infinitive. The aorist passive infinitive. How would that go? Well, the aorist passive infinitive is going to be built on the sixth principal part rather. Okay, do we need to look that up? Perhaps we do. Okay, luo, luso, elusa, leluka, lelumai, eluthane, eluthane. Okay, so we'll start with that form. Okay, eluthane. Now, what happens? Well, first thing that happens is the temporal augment goes away. Okay, that form, that augment disappears in anything but the indicative form. Okay, the infinitive is such a non-indicative form. Okay, so it goes away. The aorist passive infinitive, then, we simply have to do what? We simply got to slap on the appropriate infinitival ending, which is either the ein or the I. In this case, it's the I. Okay, and here the I is short, as it was in the aorist active infinitive, and so therefore we circumflex the eta. Okay, if you don't remember that, don't worry about it. Okay, if you recess the accent all the way, I wouldn't be too concerned. But so keep in mind the most infinitives get the accent on the penult. I mean, okay, just by rule. Okay, they do not obey the rule of recessive accentuation. If this were a regular recessive accentuation, the accent will go over the upsilon, but it doesn't. Okay, again, don't fret if you don't remember that. Okay, on an exam or something like that, it's not that big a deal. Okay, you're not trying to learn how to write and speak this stuff. You're trying ultimately to be able to read the Bible. Okay, but just keep in mind that's what you get. The second plural aorist middle indicative. The second plural aorist middle indicative. Okay, again, the aorist middle will be based on the third principal part, elusa. Okay, but to make it middle, we've got to do what? We've got to switch to our middle passive endings. Not passive, rather, for the aorist, only middle. Those are distinctive. So we have our secondary endings, men, so, to, metha, s, onto. Okay, well, so we have the s. All right, so it looks something like this. Elusista, elusista. And the accent, 1, 2, 3 syllables back. Badoom. Okay? Wonderful. Next one. The second plural aorist passive indicative. The second person plural aorist passive indicative. What would that be? Okay, well, the aorist passive, again, is built on what? Eluthane. Okay, the sixth principal part. You've got to know your principal parts, guys. Okay, eluthane. How does it conjugate? Eluthane, eluthase, eluthe, eluthamen, eluthate, elutheson. So eluthate is our form, desired form, and the accent has to go here. Okay. Excellent. Let's move on down and maybe scroll up here a little bit. Okay, now, our first plural perfect active indicative. First person plural perfect active indicative. Okay, the perfect, again, was derived from the fourth principal part, and the active, leluca. Luo, luso, elusa, leluca. All right, so no problem. We simply put that in. Leluca. Okay, so the first person plural, to make it plural, we've got to do what? Just give it a plural ending. Lelucamen. Lelucamen. Now, unfortunately, we've got to move the accent up one, though, right? So we can only go back 3 syllables. And there we are. Voila. Okay. The present middle passive infinitive. The present middle passive infinitive. Well, again, any present is going to start out with the first principal parts. That's always a good place to start. Okay, so the present passive middle infinitive. Well, if it were active, it would be what? It would be luane, like that. But we didn't want that one. We wanted the passive from the middle. Okay, so you got to get that sound there, the luestai. Okay, and that's what you would have there. Now, don't ask me why this I is, you don't have the requirement to accent the penult with this particular infinitive, just with the others. Okay. Again, if I were to be brutally honest with you, I don't remember the rules myself 100% of the time. So I'm not going to expect you to remember them. But keep in mind is that the rule that we have with the other infinitive doesn't apply to this one. Okay. But in general, all verbal forms are recessively accented. Just remember the infinitives don't obey that rule perfectly. Okay, and we'll see later the imperatives are a little bit different too, accentually. Okay. All right, let's move on. Third singular imperfect passive indicative. Third singular imperfect passive indicative. Well, again, the imperfect always starts with the first principal part. Okay, what happens? You get an augment and a secondary ending. What secondary ending? Well, the third singular imperfect passive indicative, you want secondary endings. Men, so, to, metha, sa, onto. Okay? So to would be the one you want, or ta. So a luata, like that. Okay? All right, number 22, the masculine nominative plural present active participle. Okay, very good. This is the first participle we've had, and this is gets into material from this particular chapter that you're doing. Okay, so let's take a look at the participles again and see if we can figure out some patterns here, which perhaps should have already occurred to us. Okay, notice here for the present active participle you have a masculine, a feminine, and a neuter form here. Okay, the masculine is luan, luantas, okay, like that. The neuter, luan, luantas. Both of those decline like third declension nouns, okay, namely archon, archontas. Okay, that's why we didn't learn these until now, because you hadn't done the declension yet. Okay, so the declension of luan, luantas would be luan, luantas, luanti, luanta, luantes, luantone, luusin, okay, and then finally luantas. All right, and the neuter would be similar, except in the neuter paradigm, where you have the masculine and the accusative forms are always the same with a neuter noun. Okay, so that's the masculine and the neuter. Those are all third declension. Okay, you see the same pattern, by the way, in the aorist, okay, with the masculine and the neuters. You see it in the aorist passive, luthes, luthentas, luthen, luthentas. Again, third declension. Same thing with a perfect active, lulukas, lulukatas, lulukas, lulukatas. Okay, so you see it. It's very common for masculine and neuter participles to be declined that way. Okay, remember, they're basically nouns, and so they decline like nouns. Okay, the feminine, however, is going to obey the rule of the first declension, mixed stem, like doxa, doxes, doxa, doxes, doxe, doxon, doxai, doxon, doxais, doxas. Okay, so again, that's the form you get for that one. So remember those paradigms from before. They will serve you very, very well in handling these various verbal stems. Okay, so, but what we want, I think we wanted a masculine, didn't we? Is that what we asked for? Yeah, masculine nominative plural present active participle. Well, again, let's just type out the basic here. Luan, comma, luantas. Okay, we jumped down, but who cares? Okay, so what happens? Okay, luanti, luantas, luanti, luanta, luantes. Okay, will be our masculine nominative plural. The only way you can know that is by knowing your third declension pattern. Okay, that's why you've got to know archon, and remember that one. Okay, so luantes. Okay, and we just give it the appropriate accentuation. And again, you have issues with accentuation with participles because they work like nouns, and so they're a little bit harder to accentuate correctly every time. Okay, it's easy to forget how they go, so don't worry too much about it, but that's where it should go. Okay? All right, let's move on. The feminine genitive singular present active participle. The feminine genitive singular, if you recall, for the present, is like doxa, doxes. Okay? So doxes, or luuses in this case, will be the form we want. That's going to be the feminine singular. Okay? So luuses. Except I've got that accentuated wrong, because you've got a long vowel here, and so I can't have an accent that goes all the way back on a long vowel. It's got to move up. It's got to move to here. Okay, that form, that rule stays. Okay, so luuses. All right. Let's continue here. The neuter accusative singular present middle participle. Present middle participle. Well, we haven't looked at middle or passive participles yet. Okay. It turns out in the present tense, just as the finite forms are ambiguous with the middle and passive endings, so also with participles. They're the same. But what are they? Well, luamenas, luamenu, luamene, luamenes, luamenon, luamenu. Okay, they decline like what? Well, the masculine and the neuter, they decline like logos. Okay, in the masculine, or ergon in the neuter. Okay, in the feminine, they decline like a regular eta stem first declension noun. What was the one that we had? I can't even remember which one I gave you, but it's the ace, ain. Okay, one, I, own, ice, os. Okay, so just remember that one. Okay, so luamenos, luamenu. Okay, so what do we have here? Let's take a look here. The neuter accusative singular. Well, luamenon would be our base form here. That's our nominative. Okay, but remember, the nominative and the neuter the nominative and the accusative for a neuter noun are the same. Okay, so that's actually the form we want. Luamenon. Okay, very good. Let's get one more done here. We can blow this clam bake. So masculine genitive plural, present middle participle. The masculine genitive plural, present middle participle. Okay. In this case, we go back to the masculine, but again, that's going to be the same. And by the way, just remember these menos, menu, mene, menes endings. Okay. Anytime you see a menos ending or something like that, it's going to be some kind of a participle. Okay, because notice the same basic pattern is seen in the aorist, as we will see, and the same basic pattern is seen in the perfect middle or passive. Okay, so again, just you can eliminate possibilities quickly if you can remember little patterns like that. Okay, so what do we want here? Okay, the masculine genitive plural present middle participle. Well, again, what would the masculine nominative be? Singular. Luamenos, like that. Okay, so it goes what? Luamenos, luamenu, luameno, luamenon. Okay, then luamenoi, just like logoi, and then luamenon. Okay, and you've got to accentuate it here. Okay, very good. Thank you for putting up with this. I hope this is helpful, and we will see you again next week.